Those of us who love nature photography enjoy being outdoors and its endless beauty. But how much do we stop to reflect on what nature is telling us about its own place in the world, and even telling us about ourselves? Hi, I'm Beth Velo, and this is Pixels, where we explore the heart and art of photography. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm pleased to welcome Michele Sons to the conversation. Her message is so needed in this increasingly virtual world, as she invites us to connect more fully with our surroundings. Michele also encourages us to approach our craft with a playful spirit and shares how she has continued to hone her vision through continuous curiosity. Michele Sons is a fine art, landscape, and nature photographer, writer, and educator based in the Appalachian Mountains of Virginia, with clients including National Geographic, the Wilderness Society, Appalachian Trail Conservancy, Smokies Life, and other nonprofits that serve our nation's national parks. Her work tends towards quiet, pared down, subtle representations of her deep reverence for the natural world. Fog, mist, and soft light are intrinsic elements present in many of her images. Michele's uniquely nomadic background, advanced degrees in environmental biology and physical geography, and a 20-year corporate career in spatial analysis provide a personal perspective that informs her creative focus on connection and expression. Her newest book is Dawnland: Creative Holistic Approaches to Photographing Acadia National Park. Her ebook offers both technical and artistic approaches to photographing one of America's most visited national parks, along with Acadia's physical and cultural geography to facilitate connection to place and creative prompts for your own expressive image making. As always, a very special thank you to my video editor extraordinaire, Alex Armitage.
Okay, so what did you like about this composition?
So I like the fact that the line of the, where the waves are breaking connects up with the rock on the right. Oh, you're filming.
This is Michele.
Hi, everyone.
She was explaining to you this really beautiful composition down here in Acadia National Park.
And to Nick Stover of Nature Photography Classes and his Inspired Creator Grant, which is a supporter of this channel. If you have a creative idea you want to get off the ground or expand, you can learn more and submit your own application at naturephotographyclasses.com/inspired-creator. I also want to mention Harper Finch, providers of quality photography themed tees. This isn't an ad, and I'm not getting paid, and they're not sponsors. I just love their selection, and I've gotten really wonderful customer service from them. It's where I ordered the tee that I'm wearing now. And if you're looking for something like this, I'll leave a link in the description if you want to check it out. So they're a small business and they're doing great things, and just wanted you to know. If you're listening to this podcast on an audio only format, you can visit pixelspodcast.com to view the images that we reference during this conversation. And let us know in the comments what was most useful or meaningful to you in this conversation. Your reviews, your likes, and your subscribes are always welcome. They help the channel to grow. They support me being able to bring more of these amazing photographers to you. So with all of that said, it's time to get to the conversation. Hi, Michele. Welcome to Pixels. I've been looking forward to this conversation, and especially since I got to experience you and your wonderful photography and presentation skills last year at Out of Chicago Live. So it's a pleasure to be able to have a one-on-one conversation with you.
I'm really excited to meet you, Beth. I've been watching Pixels now for a little while, and it's a pleasure to meet you in person. Per se.
Yeah, right. This is about as close to in person as we sometimes get, but it's got to do, right? So what's making you smile today?
Well, actually, tomorrow I'm preparing to deliver a large piece of art to a juried art show here in Roanoke at Roanoke College. And so today I'm making the final preparations to the piece to submit to the show. And so I'm very excited about it. It's a large piece. It's a new piece. It's sort of a magical multiple exposure of fireflies in the Smokies. And so It's gorgeous. It's big. You can see all the incredible detail in it, and it's making me smile. So,
oh yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I know one of your ebooks is about fireflies. Am I right about
It
that?
is. Yes, I have a free ebook about the making of this image and 5 others that go along with it. So kind of
Yeah.
step-by-step instructions on how to do that. So
Yeah. What Well, fireflies are cool, but what would you say was kind of the catalyst for turning your camera to them to such a degree that you have this body of work and commentary around it?
well, I have a great friend by the name of Darlene, and she's a firefly lover. And she had, for a number of years, has been wanting me to join her down in the Smokies for this synchronous firefly event.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, eventually worked out that we could go together, and we went down and we camped and we viewed the fireflies. And of course, I took my camera along with me and gave it sort of a shot. It's not my typical style of photography. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of technical, but I gave it a shot and I just loved it. And I went back again the following year. But just a very limited number of images are possible because you kind of
Mm-hmm.
set your camera up and it sits there in the one position, making multiple exposures over time through the course of the night. And so I can only make 2. I have 2 camera bodies. So I can only
Mm-hmm.
make 2 compositions per night. So it's a small body of work.
Yeah, but one that requires, it sounds like, a lot of patience and, like you said, a layer of technical consideration
Yes,
that maybe we're
definitely. Yeah.
not used to.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, very cool. Well, I'll make sure that there's a link to the ebook in the description of the show,
Great.
so
Great.
that folks can find that. Well, I want to jump in with something that you share on your website, and I'm going to read it just to make sure that I get it correct. But you say, I believe that we can harness nature's stories to tell our own stories, and that this process of expression can improve our well-being and feed our souls. So when I read this, it seems like it's an invitation for us to go beyond like just taking pretty pictures and being more in relationship, not just with the images and the subject, but with nature in general. So how do you cultivate that kind of relationship? And I think you use the word connection a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And what insights can you offer those of us who are feeling like we want to have a stronger relationship and connection to nature?
Yes. I love this question, and I did give it some thought. And I think that the way in which I cultivate my relationship, and it absolutely is a relationship with the natural world, is simply by being fascinated by it and in love with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that sort of love for the outdoors drives a lot of different kind of behaviors and pursuits on my part, all of which facilitate the connection that I'm looking for. And I would actually go so far as to say that really my photography is primarily, it's not solely, but it's primarily a tool for building those connections, right? It gives me license to notice, to spend time outdoors, to sort of weave the story of my own life together with the stories of the natural world, and ultimately to see myself reflected in the natural world. So I think it's that kind of love and passion that drives me towards or gives me that desire to make those connections. So that's sort of the primary goal with my photography, is that it facilitates the connection. It's about the connection rather than the images. Yes, the images play into it, but it's that feeling of connection and tying my story to the places that I spend time in that really gives me that sort of reward.
Yeah.
And so I guess as an example, I have a background, an academic background in physical geography. And I feel that that background really informs the way in which I initially approach a place. When I'm there for my photography, I'm really interested to know, well, where is this place like on the map, and how does it relate to the other places around it? I'm a huge map geek. I love them. When I go and I stay, like if I stay in a hotel, I inevitably have a map up so I can see, this place on, the general layout of the area. I want to know how a place came to be, what's the story of its birth, as it were. And so that, I guess, is just an example of what I do and where I go to find that connection. Is just to ask those questions and seek those answers.
It sounds like your fascination, your curiosity about nature has long been with you. It sounds like it comes somewhat naturally. I'm curious about the story part and how you are connecting your story with the stories in nature. What are you aware of in terms of how you raise your own awareness of your stories and then carry those out into the field when you have your camera?
I think giving you an example to illustrate sort of the process is probably the best way to answer that question. And I would say there's a story about a particular pine tree in the New River Gorge National Park. And I tell this story it's in my ebook, River Song, and I think it might be in my free ebook, Appalachian Dreams. But there's this little gnarly pine tree that's sort of clinging to the edge of the New River Gorge, and it's sort of suspended 1,000 feet above the river below, and it's all contorted and sort of impacted by the extreme environment that it exists in. And I sort of discovered this tree on a hike a couple of years ago. And in just observing the tree, I'm looking around and I'm thinking, wow, this tree has really, faced a lot of challenges. It must be incredibly tenacious, incredibly persistent. Just having these thoughts about what it must be like for this tree. And at the time I was going through quite a few personal challenges of my own. And it just sort of dawned on me, hey, this tree, I'm like this tree. I sort of am facing these challenging conditions around me. I need to be tenacious. I need to be persistent. And it's just sort of, the contemplation of the tree and making that connection in my mind with my own personal experience. That's the connection. That's seeing myself reflected there. That's recognizing the story of the tree, recognizing my own, and then sort of bringing them together. Yeah. So that image is a very meaningful image for me because it represents, a moment of realization for myself. So.
It seems like we can, it's like nature as catalyst for some self-reflection and recognizing our stories and seeking inspiration or even comfort in what we find, because we do see it reflected. Like, maybe we feel less alone in whatever it is because we see it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
That sort of speaks to this sense of belonging. And by the way, the tree image I'm telling the story about is actually one of my pivot pixels.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. But yes, in my free ebook, Appalachian Dreams, I tell the story of finding, I have a strange background, a highly nomadic background. I never had any particular home as a young person, moving around all over the world with my family because of my dad's job. And so I never felt like I belonged in any one place. I was just sort of this nomadic kid with no place that I really belonged to. And so I feel like today, a lot of what I'm doing in my work, in my photography, is seeking that sense of belonging. And it took me more than 20 years, but I did eventually find that feeling of belonging to the place in which I've lived for the last 20 plus years. And that's the Appalachian Mountains.
Yeah.
And that's been a very healing and meaningful thing for me. So absolutely, I have found that feeling of belonging in a place as a direct result of my photography. So
yeah, thank you for sharing that. And it strikes me like those trees and the rootedness even is part of the story as well. And so for somebody who is wanting to go on that kind of, or approach their photography that way, any thoughts on how they might start cultivating that awareness of either nature or themselves, in order to kind of facilitate that reflection.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things you can do to cultivate that connection. Just being curious will drive all sorts of choices that can help inform you about the place that you're either photographing or curious about. Reading about that particular environment, what sorts of things are notable about it, how did it come to be, what are some of the important features or creatures that you might come across in this place. That's a really good starting point, watching film documentaries about your place. There's many, many more, and I have kind of a list of things that either I've tried or have been suggested to me personally. In another, sorry to keep saying this, but in another free ebook that viewers can download, it's called Cultivating Connection, and it gives kind of a laundry list of different techniques that people can try to foster those moments of connection and seeing yourself in the natural world. Just being near water is a good one. That's sort of a very soothing, sort of gentle, quiet feeling that is conducive to making those connections in your brain between what you're seeing and your own lived life.
Yeah, I kind of experienced that this summer, spending I hadn't realized it before, but I had never spent significant time by a river, like a real running river. And I don't know why I was surprised by its energy and the way I was drawn to it. But it was very healing, and it was very much a catalyst for kind of expanding my perspective.
There's something primal about a river.
Yeah. And it's interesting because it has all of those traits that you were describing in that tree. In some ways, it's got an ancientness to it. It's got resilience and power and rootedness, even though it's fluid and moving. There's something unmovable about it. So yeah, love that.
I like that.
It makes me want to get back to a river really soon. So I wanted to say, we've been talking a little bit about your ebooks, and one of the newest one is called Dawnland. Or do you say Dawnland or Dawnland?
Dawnland, yeah.
Dawnland. Yeah, but congratulations on it. It's really, it's beautiful, and it's part of your lyrical landscape series. And one of the other ways that we're connected, besides having crossed paths out of Chicago, is through the Inspired Creator Grants.
That's right.
Because I believe Dawnland was a result of that grant. Am I remembering that right? Yeah.
Yes, so that's correct. Yeah.
Congrats on that as well. And
thank you.
I always am mentioning the Inspired Creator Grants. And so if you are listening or watching this, and if you have a project or an idea that you want to bring to life, Nick Stover through naturephotographyclasses.com. He's so incredibly generous and is super supportive of photographers really finding ways to express themselves and really step into their full potential. Back to Dawnland. Would you tell us a little bit about how that came to be? And in particular, the word that kept jumping out at me was holistic. And it's not a word I've seen a lot of photographers use. So tell us about that.
Okay. So actually, those two questions are very closely related in terms of my answer. So when I was a novice photographer, I found it very easy to find material that would help me learn about the technical aspects of photography. Basically, anywhere I went looking, I was able to find educational material that could help me learn about gear, settings, technical theory, all of these things. And as I grew and became very proficient at the technical side of things, I felt like I needed to start developing my artistry and my vision as an artist, because I believe strongly that certainly my own photography, I seek to be expressive with that. And therefore I see it as a form of art. rather than a form of documentation. Mm-hmm. And so I was interested in growing that side of my craft, and growing as an artist and thinking through, what is behind images and what do they mean and what are they trying to say. But I found it very difficult to locate any kind of educational material that not only presented that information to a learning photographer, but presented it alongside the technical information. So really, there's two sides to our equation, the equation of photography, right? The technical and the artistic. And I just couldn't find anything that presented both sides together at once. And I really, in coming up with the idea for the Lyrical Landscape series, that was what I was seeking to offer, was that sort of holistic approach, both technical and artistic. So I believe that's my goal with the series. There was also inspiration that drove it. I read Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, and it was hugely impactful on me just as a human. But her concept of, a holistic approach to botany, I felt could translate over into this idea I had for a holistic approach to teaching out photography. And she spoke about, the song of plants and how their song had to encompass both the physical, what she called the mind-body elements of a plant, which she equated with Western science, right? The study of botany, that needed to be accompanied by kind of a spiritual knowing or an indigenous knowing about the emotional aspects of plants. And so she seeks to tell the stories of these plants in a holistic way, dealing with both their scientific and their spiritual sides. And so I just loved that concept and felt, it helped me come up with the idea for the Lyrical Landscape series. So.
Yeah, I so appreciate that. And I've heard so many people over the past couple of years reading and talking about braiding sweetgrass. And so it has to get on my reading list.
It's remarkable.
Now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone I've heard from has been very moved by it and affected by it. So what I really appreciate about what you're saying is like the scientific and the spiritual, it's a both and. Sometimes in our commentary about these things, we can treat it as an either or. And so being able to appreciate all aspects of whatever it is we're photographing or enjoying or viewing or reflecting on, it feels like it's so much more nurturing and honoring of what it keeps us from taking from the landscape or the plant.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think it moves it from a transactional approach to a process of connection and sort of binding yourself to the stories of the places that you're spending time in and pointing your camera at, that it's more than just photographs. This is a question I've asked a few of my guests, and one I've been tossing around is around how much we say about the story that we have with our images. How much do we share about context, the sort of the backstory, the context, the way I as a photographer might be feeling about it, what I'm hoping someone takes away from it versus leaving things up to the viewer? I think it depends on what your goal is as an artist. Is your goal to educate an audience, as it is for me? In which case, of course, you have to talk about these things in order to pass the information along. Is your goal to enrich your personal experience of connecting with a place? Well, if it is, then perhaps the need to communicate that out publicly is less important. Personally, I believe that communicating, trying to wrap words around concepts, ideas, feelings, I think can really help clarify thoughts for me as an artist. And writing about my process, writing about my experience, writing about the meaning behind certain images has really helped me come to an understanding about myself And so I think there's an innate value in doing that. I'm not a purist. I don't believe that photography, an image should speak for itself exclusively, always. I think there's value in combining communication styles, right? Visual communication with written communication. It can be very enriching and sort of, weave together, weave meaning in from both directions, from a visual and a written perspective. So I think for me anyway, there's been great value in doing that.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I agree. And it's always interesting to hear perspectives on that. So thank you for sharing. I want us to turn to some of your images now. And we already started talking about one of your pivot pixels, but maybe let's backtrack a bit. And when I first saw this image, my thought was, ouch. The soles of my feet are frozen. But tell us about this particular image and what makes it significant for you.
So it's called Desert Trio by Moonlight. And it's not snow. It looks like snow. It's white like snow. But it's White Sands National Park, which is a gypsum desert. So the sand is made of a material that's different from normal sand. And it's sort of this white gypsum. And it's a favorite location of mine. I would go there every day of my life if I could, if I lived nearby. I love it that much. But the image is from a long-running series of mine called The Feminine Landscape. And it's a self-portrait series that combines both landscape and portrait genres. And it showcases moments that I experience, moments of sort of quiet connection and metaphor in the landscape. So this particular image represents sort of a point of evolution in the series. I started the series 12 years ago, and it's actually officially it's retired for a variety of reasons, but I do occasionally resurrect it. But this image represents sort of a moment of transition in the project where I sort of came to the realization, just to describe what's going on in the image first. So, there's a quiet gesturing going on here. I came across these two yuccas in the morning before the sunrise, and the moon was setting in the background. And the yucca on the left is sort of leaning towards the moon. And I happened to have, at that time, I always traveled with dresses in my camera backpack. And I happen to have, I know it's odd, I happen to have this particular skirt, which was very impractical to carry around, but I had it shoved down in the bottom of my pack. And it sort of mimicked the shape of the base of these yucca plants. And that was complete serendipity. That was not planned. It was a lucky accident. So there's sort of a mirroring going on in the shape between the skirt and the yucca. But then also in the moment when I placed myself in this scene, initially I had picked up, if you look in the photograph, you can see there's a kind of a skeleton piece of a flowering part of a yucca that's on the ground in front of me. And initially I had picked that up and kind of held it and sort of mirrored the yucca on the left. But I decided that felt just a little bit too obvious. And so I put that back down, and I just kind of cocked my head, to sort of like quietly suggest a mimic of that gesture of the yucca on the left. Yeah. And when I saw the image, I felt in the moment, it felt significant that, I was standing here shaped like the yucca, looking in the same direction. And, and we're all sort of like an audience of this beautiful moon. And it just felt like this meaningful moment for me. And then when I saw the image on the back of my camera, I realized that captured here was sort of an essence that was rooted in my work. And that's that sort of organic connection with the natural world, as well as just sort of authentic personal expression, and that all of this came together in this image, and that was the direction that I wanted to go as an artist. It was not just making images, but making authentic moments and moments of connection that were then translated into beautiful images. So, and the project kind of like, it took a little direction towards this sort of meaningful gesturing.
Yeah, it's lovely. And it's an image that I see and I'm immediately drawn to it and compelled by it. And the more I look at it, the more I see, the more it kind of reveals, because now there's like this depth. Like I love the yucca plant that's further, like that forms a triangle sort of on the ground. And then you have the triangle with the moon. And it gives it this depth that is really compelling. And I don't know. It's, I will fail to have adequate words, I think. But there is such a strong, there's a conversation happening in this photo that you seem to be inviting us into. And
that's a great way to put it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. Because it's beautiful. We've already talked a little bit about this tree with this image with the tree on the edge overlooking the river, but tell us a little bit, anything else that is significant about this particular image for you.
There is. And so this, I told you the story behind the image, so I won't repeat myself, but there's sort of another layer to the image, and that is that it's part of an ongoing project I have called Musings on Motherland, where I bring together scenes from Appalachia, where I live and do most of my photography, with elements of an Asian or specifically a Japanese aesthetic. And that project was born from this process of finding a sense of belonging in this place where I've lived for 20 plus years. I came to learn about connections between Appalachia and parts of Western Europe, such as Scotland and Ireland, where there's a geological connection between the two places. And Ireland is actually where I've always felt was my motherland. There's a whole story behind that. But so finding this geological connection was significant for me and was sort of an avenue into this feeling of belonging in a place that I didn't feel I belonged to. But when I discovered this geological connection, I also learned about something called the Asian connection, which is a botanical connection between Appalachia and parts of Asia, including Japan. And I have personally experienced Japan and just absolutely fell in love with it and feel very drawn to that sort of Japanese aesthetic. And so learning about this botanical connection gave me the idea for this project where I could take scenes from Appalachia and sort of compose them and present them in a way that tied them to these Asian or Japanese aesthetic principles. So this image, it's actually called Juxtaposition, and this image is from that series. And I think it's obvious how it's connected to that Asian aesthetic. I mean, it's obviously a very bonsai looking tree and that sort of snowy landscape and the spare but precise presentation of the elements in the image all tie it back to that Asian aesthetic. So
and there's a balance to it as well. And the snow, the phrase that went through my mind is quasi bonsai.
I like that.
The snow helps to kind of obscure the maybe the reality of the tree, and you immediately see a bonsai because the emphasis is more on the shape of that trunk and the flatter sort of spread of the branches. And I love how it seems to be overlooked. It's like it's watching over that river. again, you're showing like relationship between elements in a way that it seems like they're communicating with each other, because even the tree and the river are sort of leaning into each other in the way this is composed.
There's also, if you look closely, you can see, and this is the case throughout the New River Gorge, there are many human elements present here. And so there's the snow-covered areas along the sides of the river, actually railway tracks. And then on the gorge wall behind the tree is a structure that they used to use to bring coal down to the river to transport it away. A coal tipple, I think it's called. So there's that coming together of natural elements with the man-made elements too.
Yeah, lovely. And again, you're emphasizing the power of curiosity and getting more information about the environment in which you are photographing, to enhance the possibilities that you can see and capture. So this one is really compelling to me. I love this. I'm assuming it's a multiple exposure.
It is. Yes, it is.
Unless we're on another planet. I think it was like Star Wars, with multiple moons. But tell us about this and what place it has in your journey.
The title of the image is Many Moons, and it was made not far from my home, which is very close to the Blue Ridge Parkway in Virginia. And I don't go up there for photography very often at all. I find it a difficult place to connect with. It's sort of mostly distant scenes from a road that runs along the spine of the Blue Ridge Mountains. And so it has some unique photographic challenges. And personally, the road and the distance all make it difficult for me to connect. So I don't go up there very often for photography. But I did go up the night before a full moon. This is going back maybe 2 or 3 years. And it was in the fall. And I went up to a favorite overlook, hoping for some interesting skies. Some clouds, but not too many.
Right.
Not so many that it obscured the moon, but enough to make things interesting. All of which is a very tall order. And Mother Nature offered me none of that. I was offered...
She's fickle.
She's fickle. I was offered cloudless skies, which were just strikingly beautiful in person, but not visually compelling in terms of straight image making. And so, as I do when I'm presented with conditions maybe aren't, at least on the surface, conducive to image making, I call them my back pocket techniques.
Yeah.
I pulled out intentional camera movement and multiple exposure just to kind of play around and see what I could do. The ICM didn't really lead anywhere, but the multiple exposure did. And so as I was layering these images in camera, I was zooming in and out, being mindful of, where I was placing the moon. And I was, building up this layered image that was much more visually interesting and took on this almost otherworldly feeling, as you said, as though you were on another planet. And I think the light too, the sun was behind me. And as it sank, the shadow across the valley floor in front of me crept forward, and the tops of the mountains still were partially illuminated. And so it created this beautiful gradient, which was emphasized by the layers of the multiple exposures. And so it sort of took on layers of interest, both literally and figuratively, that it didn't have as a simple straight scene. And I think it was a pivot moment for me and my photography, because I felt it, this sort of like realization that this in-camera multiple exposure, and later I discovered Photoshop multiple exposure. But this technique of multiple exposure was something that I considered a part of my style. And it's something that I carry with me everywhere I go. I usually bring it out at some point in a shoot or a trip because I'm so fascinated by it. And I just have so much fun seeing what I can do with it. So,
yeah. Well, your statement about like considering it part of your back pocket tool, um, and how you can draw on that when you get to a situation and it doesn't deliver what you were hoping for. If we have those back pocket tools, and I would say ICM and being able to do in-camera multiple exposure are two ways that you can do something with anything, basically.
That's right.
You will never be disappointed by conditions if you have those, like you said, in your back pocket. And so if this doesn't inspire somebody to try that, I don't know what would.
They really place the focus on your creativity as an artist as well. And I love that. And I love breaking free of the constraints of the conditions that I'm offered. So I love it for so many reasons.
Yeah. Yeah. And it infuses a sense of play, and that experimentation and just it appeals to the rebel, I think, in all of us. Like, oh, forget your rule of thirds, So yeah, so thank you for sharing the backstory behind this lovely image, and reminding us about the value of having those multiple techniques that we can draw on to make the most of just about any place we find ourselves.
Definitely.
You mentioned before challenges that you've encountered, and I'm wondering if there are any challenges in particular that you've learned something from that has supported your growth as an artist, and that might be beneficial for us, that might resonate in terms of us knowing, number one, not feeling alone in whatever it is, but just learning something from your own resilience.
So I think this ties back to something I mentioned earlier, which is, it was very easy to find material to educate myself on the technical aspects of photography, not so much on the artistic side. And I was very specifically interested in growing my artistry. I wanted my photography to be art. I've never wanted to go down the path of photography as documentation. I've always wanted to use it as a tool for self-expression. I think I'm just wired that way, to express. I'm not very good at doing it with words. I love like clothes and fashion, and I think I use that as a form of self-expression. But I'm just limited in how I can express myself in other ways. And I saw photography as an opportunity to do that, and I felt very strongly compelled to do that, but I didn't know how to do that. I just couldn't find material or instruction. And again, I'm sort of like a whole brain kind of thinker. Like I'm equally right and left brained. I don't necessarily want to tackle one side of it separate from the other side. I want to have it all at once, presented all at once. And so I couldn't find that, but I was fortunate to just randomly cross paths with an amazing man who became my mentor for many years, incredibly talented and generous human. And he helped me grow that artistry. He helped me understand the kinds of questions I had to ask myself in order to be able to make expressive work and to understand who I was as an artist and also as a human being. And so he really helped me develop as an artist. I don't believe I would be where I am today without his years of skilled direction and sort of prodding and supporting and sort of confidence building. And so I think, it's definitely a luxury to have a mentor, but I think if viewers are interested in developing their artistry, that one way, there are many ways you can do that, but one way you can do that, and the way I found to do that, was to benefit from this mentoring relationship. And, start to learn from someone whose work resonates for you, who, is further down the line in terms of their growth and development as an artist. Ask questions, seek support, I found that to be the most effective way, to grow my artistry. So.
Yeah. Yeah, to be able to learn from another photographer's experiences and to get their perspective and to just bounce your vision off of and have some sort of feedback loop is really
so he was
valuable.
able to see things in my work that I don't think I would have seen without the benefit of his eyes. And then once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Right.
But yeah, I don't think I would have seen it without somebody else, an outside observer pointing it out to me. So
yeah. And it seems social media is a feedback loop of sorts, but it's often a feedback loop of, this is beautiful, I love this is great. And that all feels good, but having that kind of mentor relationship where you can have that honest exchange is really where the growth happens. It's very vulnerable, I think.
It is, and that's not really
empowering.
Something. Yes, it's both of those things. But I think you don't want to, there's questions that need to be asked of your work. And I think a public setting like social media is not the right forum for that. A private setting, a private conversation where someone asks you, what are you trying to say with this image? What do you think this element of your image says? How could you have handled this differently? Even I think you approach this in a flawed way. I mean, just having that conversation is a very vulnerable thing. Social media isn't the right place for that at all, in my opinion.
And when I think about how to choose a mentor, like you said, somebody who's, further down the path, and that it seems like someone you can trust and someone that can, just because someone's an excellent photographer doesn't mean they'd be an excellent mentor.
There has to be a connection in place for sure, a personal connection, like something has to click between a mentee and a mentor in order for it to be a productive relationship, for sure.
Yeah, the idea of a mentor has come up a few times in different Pixels conversations. So I'm really glad that that's come up. And here we are, even we're having this conversation in January, and every day is a new year, the start of a new year. And it's always a good time to try something new. And so I can scarcely think of anything that would probably elevate your photography more than engaging a mentor and really committing to that kind of process. Yeah.
I think it's probably kind of like finding a therapist in a way.
Right.
It's like there's a right choice and there's a wrong choice. And if you reach out to somebody and you have a couple of sessions with them and it just doesn't feel right, then you shouldn't feel like you have to go on. Like, it's important. When you're looking for someone to help you grow, it's important for that person to be a good match for you in order for it to benefit you to the max, for you to get the most out of it. So,
absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Maybe what we're talking about right now is one of those things, but what do you feel like somebody watching this can do today that their future self is going to be grateful for when it comes to their creative journey?
So the mentoring thing is not for everybody for a variety of reasons. And so I have a couple of suggestions that anybody could take. So the first one is to embrace experimentation and play. I feel like trying new things is a really important part of the process of coming to understand who you are as an artist. If you try something new and you don't like the result, well, that's fine. You learn something about who you are, what you want to say, and your style of imagery. But sometimes you'll try something new and something about it will resonate for you. It'll really click, and it gives you sort of a new direction for exploration on the path of developing a style, coming to know yourself as an artist, and ultimately coming to know yourself as a human being. So I think experimentation and play is really important. And then as a, kind of a step 2 to that, I would say viewers should consider giving thought to their why. What I mean by that is spending time with your work, considering what types of subjects or approaches or places bring you pleasurable feelings. I mean, what is it exactly that you like to photograph, and what don't you like to photograph? what are the places that you feel a sense of belonging, or, some kind of a draw or a connection? Where are those places? And so observe your work, observe the result, observe the feelings, and then direct your efforts towards those things that have positive associations and away from those things that don't resonate. So for me, the dramatic grand landscapes felt stressful, difficult, hollow, confusing, overwhelming. Like I got all these kind of negative feelings in the beginning when I was trying to make these epic grand landscapes. And I paid attention to that, and I followed, the more positive feelings I got from doing intimate landscape work and, finding the secrets of a landscape and photographing those things in a magical way. Observe not only your work, but the feelings you experience as you're making it, and allow that to direct you towards the most meaningful subjects, places, types of work. And I feel that's how you discover yourself in your work and make more authentic work.
Yeah, that so resonates with me. When I first started looking at nature photography, of course, mostly what I saw were those epic landscapes. And I remember realizing early on, I am not an epic photographer. That's not my thing. And at first I thought it was because I don't live near that kind of landscape. I don't have the resources to constantly be traveling to do that. So at first I thought it was logistical, but then I realized it was also something deeper than that in terms of my own vision. So this, your comment about trusting your intuition, I think is super important, and it can save you a lot of grief over time. And don't bend to the algorithm.
That's right. Don't do it.
Just resist the algorithm. Oh, excellent. Well, do you have any, we've talked about your ebooks, and I would absolutely consider those resources that folks can be tapping into for both inspiration and information and that holistic approach. But do you find yourself recommending any particular resource or resources to people that you think are potentially valuable as they explore their creativity?
I do. There's one it's always the one I mention because it's been so impactful for me. And this is a recommendation for those photographers that are focused on developing their artistry. It is not a photography resource, but it is an art resource. So I sort of try to infuse my life with all forms of art, not just photographic art. And I would say the single sort of most enduring, wide-ranging resource that I've found for myself is a digital newsletter called The Marginalian. And it's by a woman called Maria Popova, who is an immigrant. And she is remarkably intelligent and such a beautiful communicator. And she sort of brings together information from across the world about all forms of art in this digital. It's a website, but she does publish a newsletter every week. It comes out on Sundays. And it just has the most intriguing resources in the newsletter. It can be books, it can be music, it can be film, it can be, paintings or illustrations. And it just is all presented in a very sort of engaging and stimulating way in this newsletter. And I highly recommend it. It's been the source of multiple ideas in my own work over the course of years. It just never gets old.
Yeah.
I do find myself sort of taking a break from it every now and again, and it'll come into my inbox and I might not read it for a few weeks. But I always seem to turn back towards it because it's such a rich resource. So I recommend that.
Awesome. Well, I will add a link to that as well. Is she a performance artist? I might be thinking
not
of
that I
someone
know
else.
of.
Okay.
Not that I know of.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking of someone that wouldn't strike me as somebody that would have a weekly newsletter.
She's an intellectual.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, awesome. So I will make sure that there's a link to that, and I'm going to subscribe myself because I love getting, saying inspiration is kind of overused. I don't know if that's exactly it, but being provoked, I guess, by different
That's a good word.
types of stimuli.
Yeah, it sends you down different thought rabbit holes,
Yeah. Yeah.
And sort of brings together disparate ideas. It sort of like stimulates the formation of connection between ideas.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. And that's really what creativity is at the end of the day. So, well, where do you hang out the most, where people can get more of Michele?
Okay. So my only social media these days is Instagram. I am typically quite active on Instagram, although of late, not so much because I've been so focused on finishing up my ebook. But I'm normally pretty plugged into Instagram. And then my website, where I share my own work and different ways of learning with me. I have a little corner of my website called The Art of Place, which is a learning resource. That's where you can purchase ebooks, download free materials, learn about private workshops, online mentoring. And then I also have free resources on my blog. And then I have a monthly newsletter. I'm pretty disciplined about getting that out every month. It's called Field Notes. And I fill it with updates, new blog posts, links to free resources from other creatives. And so you can sign up for that and stay in the know.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, so many wonderful reminders. And I think what I'm taking away is the importance of context in forming connection. And that's something I'm going to be thinking about for a while. So I'm curious for anybody who's watching this, what's standing out to you and what are you taking away and are excited to put into practice? Please share with both Michele and I. We would love to know. So thank you so much, Michele. It's been a true pleasure.
Thank you, Beth. It was lovely chatting with you today, and I'm so glad we got to meet. So
same. And someday in person.
For sure. Soon.
Soon.
I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Let us know in the comments what was most useful or meaningful to you, and be sure to subscribe so that you're notified of future episodes. This channel is made possible in part by nature photography classes and their Inspired Creator Grant. You can learn more or submit your own application at naturephotographyclasses.com/inspiredcreator. Thank you again so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.